one word answer only.
Okay.
Elvis or Beatles?
Oh, Beatles. No, I lied. I said the wrong thing.
You betrayed me.
Glass Tiger.
I'm Team Elvis. Okay. From Webisodes, this is Growability, a podcast at the intersection of urban agriculture, food security, and community.
On this episode, I speak with geologist, groundbreaking urban agriculture expert,
Nice.
professor, community leader, and my Patch co-founder, Dr. Gabor Sass. Holly, what did you think of the conversation?
I love how Gabor really puts urban agriculture at the center of climate stewardship, food security, and being a community connector. Plus, I'm betting he's an Elvis.
What really came through for me was how he encourages all of us to play a role in our communities.
Right? So inspiring.
Before we get going, a bit of housekeeping.
If you like this podcast, please tell your friends.
And make sure to rate and review us and help others discover us.
We're on all the socials. Search Growability Pod at most major platforms.
Make sure you're subscribed to our free, fresh, and nutritious newsletter at growabilitypod.com.
And we want to hear from you. Email questions and suggestions to joe@growabilitypod.com.
Big thank you to Siskins, the law firm, for hosting us in their beautiful office for this series.
And now I'm so happy to share this interview with two of my favorite Patch peeps, Joe and Gabor.
Gabor, I know we get to work together at the Patch all the time, but seriously, thanks for doing this.
You're welcome.
The audience will hear your bio in the intro to the episode, so I want to start with our shared history. Can you describe how you became involved with the Patch?
Oh, yeah. Well, it started like most good things. It started over a beer.
Yep.
With you, in fact.
Yeah.
Remember back in 2015 or 2016, we were having beer at the Root Cellar.
Yes.
And we were kind of brainstorming of ways we could work together. And
Good brainstorming session.
oh, yeah. And it led to some awesome ideas. We put those down in paper, and we started to get some traction, send it to city staff and other people who we thought would be good collaborators. And we went through many iterations of the idea, which was, I think the initial idea was to get a food hub up and running.
Right.
For growing food, which we could give away, but then also to make it a place of urban agriculture training, skills development, and programming for participants of Hutton House. We worked with different people. We had various setbacks and, things didn't exactly go the way we thought they would, but we persevered.
Right.
And we kept on.
Yeah.
Right. Just going ahead with the plan. We both believed in it, that this would be something of great value to the city, to our neighborhood, to the larger community in London. And with some element of luck or just maybe some guidance by some unseen forces, we were able to move things beyond just the idea stage.
Right.
And we had some help from City Hall. And then from there on, we were able to get the necessary permits and then over time the necessary funding to get started. So I guess that's how my involvement in the Patch project started. And we've developed a lot of things. Right now I do a lot of facilitation with various Patch groups that come out to our various sites now. So the Patch has become much bigger than we originally imagined.
Right.
And that really speaks to the collaborative spirit.
It does.
Right? Between individuals, between different organizations.
Determination, community, good luck.
Good luck, perseverance.
Perseverance.
Yeah.
So outside of the work that you do with the Patch, you're also really connected to not just your neighborhood, but the city. You've made a real effort to be a good member of your community. Not just the Kiva neighborhood, the Kensington Village neighborhood, but also the city of London. And why is that so important to you?
Well, so the way I kind of imagine, my place in this world and life is that we have these different zones of influence, spheres of influence.
Yep.
And I like to start with my own little, sphere. So if I am interested in something new, like growing stuff, urban agriculture, well, then I like to try that myself. And then, working with my family and then moving out in these circles of influence. So I've always thought that, making these connections at farther distances than just immediate family, immediate neighborhood would be really important. Because I like to connect things, connect people, and also learn from others, right? So that idea of not just sharing your ideas, but then gaining and sharing ideas with others. And so I started doing that probably 10, 15 years ago, working with and meeting up with people from different parts of the city. Like one thing kind of leads to the other. You meet this person, then they introduce you. One of the really beneficial things for me in terms of learning about how our city works, like the city structure, the city hall works, and how things get done in the city. So one of the best things was joining advisory committee, and there are various advisory committees at City Hall. And this one, the first one that I joined was the Environmental Ecological Planning Committee.
Okay.
And so
That's pretty cool.
It was pretty cool. Yeah, I was on it for a number of years, and we were looking at mostly bigger developments and their potential environmental ecological impact. So I guess we gave the various committees another perspective on things that make sure that you really hold the client, usually a developer, accountable for these and these things, right? There was another committee at that point, the advisory committee in the environment, and I joined that committee too. I was maybe a bit over eager there because I filled my plate, fairly full. So there was a time when I was actually on both of those committees. I learned a lot from these committees, not just learning about, as I said, the various processes, but meeting various staff and realizing that when I started to work more with my neighborhood in developing these gardening projects, knowing these various people at City Hall really helped in developing those projects. So having input from these staff helped us in securing funding, securing the backing of city of the various projects that we were developing, like the Wood Street Park Food Forest, and then eventually the Cavendish Community Food Hub, the Patch Project. And then, of course, there's London has a really rich environmental community, and things that relate to the environment and sustainability are really close to my heart.
Yes.
So I move in those circles, and I've met a lot of the people that do amazing work related to urban mobility, urban agriculture, energy conservation. So in my work in these various levels of influence, I've tried to develop these layers of connections to the people.
Can we talk about that a little bit? Because there are going to be people that are watching this and listening to this that are getting started right now in their community. And you mentioned that you've been at this work for at least 15 years. Have you seen change in the city for some of the work that you've been related to? Have you seen there's been growth in both things like urban agriculture, environmental sustainability? Has it been you banging your head against a wall with these great groups, or have you actually seen positive change?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been lots of growth in these various areas, let that be urban mobility, urban agriculture. Of course, some would say not at the pace that it should be undergoing, right. And we can always point to other cities around the world where they're doing a much better job. But it's just the nature of the game. Well, there's one specific example that I can point to in terms of my work related to pollinator health and improving the habitat for our pollinators. So this was work that we got involved in at the advisory committee of the environment when a community member brought this up, that this is of great urgency because we're losing our bees, our butterflies. So we started working on it. And this was right at the point when the city was rewriting its official plan. And so we got to advise the city on ways that they could improve the official plan. And now because of our work and then the committee, now there's language in the London's official plan about London being a pollinator sanctuary.
That's awesome.
Right? So at the highest level, and I was also helping in giving advice to the city on the entire plan. From a sustainability perspective. And there's a lot of language, that very positive language that really supports the work we're trying to do. Urban agriculture. Yeah. I think London is one of the only cities in Canada that has a specific chapter on food systems in their official plan. So there's high-level policies that direct the city of how it should think about and support food systems, mostly the local food system. So it goes beyond urban agriculture, but there's specific language about urban agriculture. And I think there's even one little policy item that mentions food hubs, that the City of London supports food hubs and community amenities like that, right?
Some pretty cool designations.
Yeah. So I guess this is the highest level, right, of city planning. And then you asked me, like, on the ground, what do we see evidence that there's been change? And in terms of pollinator habitat, there's a number of groups that work on it. One of the ones that probably is spearheading the effort is the Pollinator Pathways Project.
Yes. A wonderful organization.
Yeah, and we've worked with them, right?
Yeah.
At the patch. And they've been able to inspire and empower lots of households, citizens, residents of London, and an organization just to plant a little habitat on in front of their buildings, or the boulevards in front of buildings, right? So you can see the growth of these habitats that this high-level policy calls for, right? And even the City of London itself is changing the ways that they look after parks. So, in Canada, North America, we love our lawns, right?
Yes, of course.
Of course. But now, park staff, under direction, from managers and coming down from these policies, they're now changing the way they look at parks, and they're leaving some of the areas that have been mowed as more naturalized areas for pollinators to come and enjoy the flowers and what have you, right? So changes happening in urban agriculture, which we've been really working on it through the Patch Project. I mean, we can see new urban farms starting, right? And just in the past 8 years, really since the Urban Agriculture Conference, that this ACE committee helped kickstart. So I remember when I first talked with Skylar Frank, who's now a city councilor, and she was on another committee, the agricultural committee, and we started working together And it led to the conference, which then allowed people to come together, share ideas, and start projects. So Urban Roots London was founded by people that met at that conference.
Very cool.
Right?
Yes.
And it's really great to see that now things are opening up for newcomers, people of color, indigenous groups. There's now an indigenous garden, medicine garden along the Thames River. Community gardens are growing. Maybe not, again, some people might have complaints and maybe understandably so, right? Again, the pace and the nature could be always improved. But
we can always do better.
We can always do better. Yeah.
Let's talk about laying down roots, permaculture.
Yeah. Right.
When I throw that word out to you, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, permaculture is one of those words, those magic words. It's been kind of with me since the early 90s when I first came upon it at York University. I'm like, what is this word? It's a system of design, but it could be like a way of life that values nature, that values people, and that believes in an equitable sharing of everything that we have, that we use as humans, right? And that we share with each other, but share with the natural world as well. So
that fits into your work then.
It totally fits into the work.
Yeah.
Like more specifically, if we look at more the gardening aspect of permaculture, then permaculture systems really value long-term perennial growing, right? So this idea of food forests or edible forest gardens, which I've been a big proponent of, comes out of these permaculture ways of thinking. Some, the founders of the permaculture movement were two Australians, but really the ideas that they've kind of put down on paper, they are really ancient ideas, indigenous ideas of the way we indigenous people around the world have related to the land, which is with a lot of respect, and taking what they've observed from nature and putting that into their everyday life, the way they interact with the elements, with other beings, is manifests as ways that we might call permaculture ways. So at the Food Hub, we have not just vegetables, but we have some fruit guilds. So fruit guilds are like an element of a permaculture food forest. Right. So imagine a fruit tree, but then you're also planting some other plants that benefit the tree. So maybe some flowers that attract in pollinators. You could put in some species like daffodils or some smelly plants that keep away other insects that might cause the tree trouble. So instead of just having an apple tree, like in orchards, where you really value high production, you want to grow a lot of apples, which is great. It might be not beneficial for other life forms. And maybe in the long term, you are using more pesticides and other things, right? In a food forest, you would have that apple tree, but growing with other things, and which then create habitat for other critters. But then with great care and knowledge, you can still grow a lot of food for human use.
And connection, for all things, comes from respect.
Absolutely.
So it comes from respect for the land, I guess, in this case.
Yeah. So permaculture teachers would say that before we talk about anything that we do, like we need to talk about the ethics, how we relate to the land, how we relate to each other, so that there's these foundational ethical principles, earth share, like earth care, like respect for the land, learning from the land and using those natural cycles and building them into our systems. And then people care, that some of us might not have the access that others do, right? And helping them then get the access, getting them access to food or shelter, right? So building that into your permaculture system. So when you know that, okay, you have access to land, you can grow all these things, but what about your neighbor who doesn't? Like, how can you involve them? And these were some of the ideas that were also driving my work and our community's work, is that we need to share. So, that home food forest that I've started, right? I wanted to make sure that we can share that idea with others. So now we have the community food forests in our village, in Kensington Village. So permaculture ethics or basic foundational principles are, again, the earth care, people care, and then sharing the bounty.
Right.
So whatever you grow, whatever you learn, you want to share that with others and not just keep it for yourself.
So you've mentioned in the past when we've been talking and when I've been listening and reading work you've done, you've talked about 5 core concepts.
Can you say a bit more?
So, okay.
Well, I know
we have a favorite word around the office now that you brought into our life.
Okay.
Bricolage.
Yeah. So that's a nice one. That comes from our common friend, Shane O'Neill.
Yes.
Design. Yeah. And he came over and we are good friends, and he's helped me kind of develop the energy systems and other systems around in our house and around our house, and with some of the things I've been building, but kind of out of materials that just happen to be on hand, like the raised bed gardens, building it out of pallets, right? So bricolage is the art of making something out of nothing.
and it's funny that you bring that up, because my next question is about a farm made out of pallets.
Right.
Cavendish Community Food Hub.
Yeah.
Bricolage.
Bricolage at its finest example, right?
We're not talking about a space that when we began our work there was prime farmland. It had at one point been prime agricultural lands. And it was, mismanaged and neglected for many years as far as being land for growing food. And
maltreated. And it was a landfill, right? The dump.
It was a landfill. It was a dump.
London dumped all its garbage there.
That's exactly what they did. And then bricolage.
Yeah. So it's pretty amazing how we're connecting again to the roots. So there's a wonderful book by I think David Abrams.
Okay.
The Spell of the Sensuous.
Okay.
And one of the ideas is that the land calls forth the language that the people speak and the type of people that they become.
Yes.
So if you have, landscapes with jagged mountain peaks and really inclement weather, you might have people like the Vikings, really.
Yes.
I mean, good people, but more on the let's explore the world, because
a lot of energy.
A lot of energy, right? And then other landscapes, different, like the Shire landscape, like people want to do more. Yes. Anyway, so this landscape, where the Cavendish Community Food Hub is on the floodplain of the Thames River,
right,
or the Dishkanzibi, the Yanta River, and it's been farmland for probably 1,000 years.
Yes,
ever since indigenous people have used that area. So all the floodplains have really rich soil, and they've used that to grow the Three Sisters,
right? The
corn, the beans, the squash. And when the European settlers arrived, they drew maps, and they wrote on the map indigenous cornfield. So that's what it was.
Yes,
and it was right in our neighborhood where
yes,
the Cavendish Community Food Hub is, right? But it was neglected. It was maltreated in a sense, right? And so now we're kind of reviving that idea. Again, the land is calling for people in that area to grow food.
We're patching it.
We're patching it up, right?
Let's talk about patches.
Yeah, bricolage.
So, the work that we've both been involved in together, the Patch Project, it's a pretty cool acronym. But patches are a big part of your work.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned a few of them. For instance, Wood Street.
Right. Yeah. And it actually, I'm tying in what I've learned from my university training,
Yes.
which was in ecosystem science and biogeography. And they're talking about patches. Like landscape ecology is all about these patches that are used in different ways, that are habitat for different species, right? And what we've done with our ecosystems, we cut them up.
Yes.
Like we had contiguous ecosystems, huge woodlands and prairies. Now we've cut them up into smaller and smaller patches of ecosystem, right? And many species have lost their ability to live on those landscapes because these patches are become smaller and smaller.
Yes.
And they're no longer connected. So a key concept is connectivity, like connecting up these various patches. So the patches of ecosystems are that idea that you could still, that though even a small patch can be a habitat for smaller creatures, right? Maybe not for the bigger creatures. So just like bringing that into the realm of urban agriculture, you might not be able to feed your whole family for the whole year, but in a small patch, could be even like a balcony, could be even a counter where you're growing microgreens and sprouts, right? That little patch can become something.
A jar.
And a jar that feeds you with really nutritious food for, part of the week, like maybe just a garnish on something. But you have that connection then to life, to food, right? And it can start literally with a small patch, and that's what we've been doing in the Patch Project, is getting this idea out to all the people that we've come across with. Can you imagine yourself just growing, just maybe in a mason jar, just growing sprouts? Right. But if you have access to more land, then you can grow a lot more. Like whatever kind of fits your life situation, right? And then we connecting it up, right? Is that another element? The connectivity.
It is. Connection is everything. Connection is community.
Right.
And speaking of that, we're both involved in the Nathan's Urban Farm Project. Mm-hmm. How does that fit, or does that fit into bricolage?
Okay, so the first thought that comes to mind is that these tower gardens are something that we buy pre-assembled, right? Yeah. So maybe not necessarily like a bricolage concept, but then we've taken this concept of growing hydroponically and with a bit of research. So for me, this was all very new.
Yes.
Like I'm more of an outdoor grower.
Yes.
And there's a bias amongst outdoor growers is that you can't really grow food in a test tube or in a jar.
Right.
But the more I've started, digging into it and learning from Mona and Tim, the Slip,
Yes.
and then, which became part of the Patch Project, Nathan's Urban Farm, I realized the value of growing indoors, right? And it could be in a tower garden, which is, manufactured piece of equipment. But then there's other ways that you can grow without soil. So hydroponically. And one is called the Kratky method.
Yes.
And it takes just a mason jar. So we're just, again, reusing jars that are lying around. And with just a bit of MacGyvering that bottle, we can set up a plant, lettuce plant or an arugula plant that will grow in about a month's time without not much input from us. Yes. Once we've set up that jar, because we put the nutrients in the water. And again, this way of thinking, which is kind of connecting the dots and using up what's lying around, this idea it's become part of the programming that we do at the Orchard. Any of the groups, any of the programs that we've developed, I've included this way of growing.
And so we all, Nathan's Urban Farm is an innovative space. And, what would the sales pitch be if you were describing it to somebody? How would you describe Nathan's Urban Farm?
Well, it's a very, very inviting, like lush space where people can come and learn about how to grow food, how to harvest that food, and just hanging out even in the middle of the winter, right? It could be -20 outside, and you're in an indoor space, an urban farm, where you're maintaining those connections to our food.
It's interesting, and I completely agree with you, and that's how I feel the space. But if we were to write down an inventory list, it wouldn't look like that for people. But you're exactly right. If we were to, on our inventory list, we had 14 tower gardens, which are plastic silos that grow food in them. We have a shelf in the corner. We have 2 plastic accessible beds. Inside of what was an event space, and it has been created a space for us. People would, on paper, the experience would translate very differently when they arrived. And you're right, it is a lush space, but it is almost completely mechanical. Is it still an urban farm?
We could split hairs on how we, right? Like with our language, like if you talk to like a big commercial grower, maybe they would laugh at that. But it's a place where we're growing food.
Yes.
It's a landscape, like and bigger spaces lend themselves to be called, farming landscapes. Yeah. Well, just like the Cavendish Community Food Hub, we could call that an urban farm. These are smaller urban places, right?
Right.
But we are still honoring the urban agriculture. The agriculture processes, the needs of plants. Scaled down version of bigger farms, less mechanized, but still, especially the indoor farms are. The Nathan's Urban Farm is more mechanical than the outdoor spaces that we have. Places of food production, right? Because farms are places of food production, landscapes of food production.
Absolutely.
So we have that. But in all our sites, we have the more the community element, the human element,
yes.
Right? So they are also places of respite and relaxation, right? Therapy, connecting with plants just for their beauty,
yes.
Right? Just honoring their existence, and not just the fact that they're actually growing something for us that we can consume.
We're going to talk about connectivity again.
Okay.
Talk us through how connectivity guides your work. Because you, I would say, are somebody that the work that you do resonates and it connects community, both socially and ecologically. And I love that. It was what drew me to work on this project with you. So how do they coexist with you, community and connectivity? Well,
yeah, they drive everything that I do, right? So this, if you just focus on the word connectivity, I started mentioning that the ecological literature is full of this, full of the use of this term, because It's the only thing that can kind of save us and save the species around us, is connection. because
Yes.
you have these patches that are all isolated. So how do we connect them up, right? And so ecological conservation is now focused on creating these smaller patches or corridors, connectivity corridors
Yes.
that allow these species to move around. Now, in a social system, we're adding different dimensions or layers of connectivity.
Yes.
It's not necessarily a physical connectivity like that, although that could be. And we've talked about. We
Yes.
have a proposal, right, on connecting our various sites and creating landscapes of beauty and landscapes where pollinators, humans, either walking or bicycling, they can move along this corridor, like the Dundas corridor, and not only connect with others, but then have access to these patches where we grow food, right? So they also get access to food. But connection is, for humans, it's also the social connection. Like we allow people to come together and community members to meet at our various sites.
Right.
At the Food Hub, at Nathan's Urban Farm, at the Innovation Center. So these are the 3 sites of the Patch Project. But there are many other sites of urban agriculture in London that have become focal points,
Right.
community focal points, right? I think one of the taglines that we use for the proposal is making food hubs the heart of every community,
Yes.
right? It's creating spaces and places where people can connect up, maybe sharing ideas, right? Sharing drinks, sharing coffee, right? Or sharing the work that they do together.
And we talked about it earlier, and you're talking about it, right now. You're super connected to community, and the concept of inclusivity is essential to the work that we do together at the Patch. Why is urban agriculture for everyone such an important tagline? Why is it such an important goal? It's a goal. I think when people say, "What's your mission?" I think that may be one of the only one sentence missions.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's really important because as a society, but even like in the urban agriculture realm, we've kind of overlooked disadvantaged, vulnerable groups, right?
Yes.
Who are not present in many of these amazing sites where the community comes together. Because, for example, they might not have physical access, like someone in a wheelchair, mobility, or different mobility devices. So, I mean, that's a simple example of how we've tried to differentiate, or not differentiate, but allow people who have these different needs that they can actually come and be part of these community places, right? Another group, many newcomers from different parts of the world, or people of different color and or maybe a part of indigenous communities, perceived or actually real, that they don't feel welcomed, right? And so then how do we create these areas, these spaces where everyone feels welcomed? And it's a huge work. It's not something that you can solve overnight. But I think this is also an area that the Patch Project and some other projects, I think you've been talking with Mystery Furtado,
Yes.
right? Whose specific goal is to bring together or create these programs for people of color, Black community, where they can come together and create healthy landscapes through, urban agriculture, but other means as well. It's been great to see our various programs, and particularly I'm thinking of our volunteer program, and our open volunteer nights. We now have people from around the world.
That's great.
And I've been meeting people from Tanzania, from India, from China, from all around the world. And it's just wonderful to see that, that we are in those space together and we're learning from each other. I have another little story, which is
we like stories.
Yeah, amazing story of, there's a big apartment building in Kensington Village. And this elderly couple who are from China, and they don't speak a word of English.
Yes.
But just judging the way they've been always coming closer and closer to the food hub, like they were kind of interested. And then finally, at one of these open volunteer nights, they came in, and luckily there was another person from China who speaks Mandarin, and we were able to communicate. And this 87-year-old man said, "Oh, I got these seeds, these beans that I'd like to plant. Is that okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, this is great, because we've been meaning to create this green wall. So we have our spaces fenced in, right? And we have raised beds hugging the fence, or the fence hugging these raised beds. And so we went around together and planted these pole beans,
Yes.
so beans that run up onto the fence. And
I really like it.
Right? It's amazing. And then he's come back and checked on the process and said, no, don't do it that way, do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So yeah, these agricultural sites are becoming more inclusive spaces. And our work and our emphasis on making those especially our spaces, over which we have maybe a bit more control, like spaces where everyone is welcome.
Yes.
So that when we say urban agriculture for everyone, it truly means that, and that you get to see people from all walks of life.
It's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
It is for everyone. Speaking of community, you've partnered with another one of our guests, Anna Badello from Urban Roots, on a report called the Urban Agriculture as Climate Action.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of layers there.
Right.
You know that you wrote it.
Yeah.
You researched it. Do you see, when we look at urban agriculture, as a way to combat climate change, do you see that as being something that's inclusive?
So, governments are talking about the big things, how we can store carbon, right?
Right.
$1 billion projects here. And they deal with corporate interests, corporations, and rightfully so. Like they can, like if those projects are successful, then they can do a lot of good. But I think our kind of the everyday person has been maybe neglected or hasn't been empowered to act. And we also have these biases. Everyone's kind of finger pointing. The government points at those,
of course,
and then the people might be pointing at governments. You do it, right? So how I see that climate action will go forward at a faster clip when we think of it more broadly and more, including a broader part of society in not just the action first, but in the discussion of what would be a viable action, right? So this is what we with Anna, we tried to point out that you could do a lot of good, right? Even though like maybe the carbon grams don't add up to something big, but I think we need to give confidence to people that they actually, what they do, even if it's a small minor change, that it can add up.
It can add up.
Yeah. So
the math works.
The math works if over time we make our small steps into bigger steps.
Yes.
Right. And this is what I've been trying to kind of show with my life, how, initially I was also just making really big steps, like let's say climate wise, like in terms of the CO2 emissions, right? Starting with a small vegetable patch, changing some of the windows. Now we've totally gutted our house and made it into a super tight, so a super insulated house that uses a fraction of the energy that we used before, right? So over 20, 25 years of action, where starting with small little things, now it has become something big.
Yes.
And so taking this message out to everybody, that no matter where they are, like if they can start with just a small step, and hopefully in community with others.
Yes.
Right.
Walk together.
Walking together, and kind of pointing out that we live in an interdependent world, and we need people who are, at the grassroots level, who are more knowledgeable, who are doing more things. And then the politicians see that, there's this groundswell of support and action. Like, see all the people around my house, right? The politician's house.
Yes.
People are doing small things. Oh, maybe bigger things. Hey, maybe I should support that in the next time I vote, right? So it's kind of, we live in this interdependent world. And I know governments, again, I started with that, they want to do something big.
Yes.
But if they would, focus on the small, that can be scaled up. And over time, that gets you somewhere.
Absolutely. Resilience is a big word in climate change. But you see the idea broadly applied to societal and ecological shocks like pandemics and droughts and floods. Why is such a broad definition of resilience part of your North Star?
Yeah. I mean, I like to think in bigger systems, and I like a bird's eye view of things.
Yes.
So I've always been following, the bigger stories in the way Homo sapiens inhabits this earth, and how we use energy, how we interact with the environment. So I've been tracking the various potential, shocks that
Yes.
can hit us.
Of course.
Right? Like in the energy system, especially, like we think that energy is bountiful, and in a sense it is. But right now we rely mostly on fossil fuels, even with all the renewable efforts.
Yes.
We still use 80% of the energy we use is fossil fuel energy. Okay.
Yeah.
So imagine if there are shocks to that system, and it could be a war in the Middle East. I mean, there already are wars,
Yes.
right? But these key choke points that could be shut down, so the flow of oil, flow of natural gas stops. And then so how would our urban system be impacted, right? So I've been thinking about these things because I think these are probable things, like not in the realm of science fiction that it's not going to happen to us because we have a totally sound energy system or food system. We don't.
No.
Yeah. So we still live in fairly fragile a global system that has maybe layers of resilience because we have these interconnections which can help us in times of shock. But that connectivity could also be a negative thing because then it could be like a domino effect, right? So one system impacts the other. So imagine the energy system goes down, and then how does that impact the food system? Most of the food is a globalized food system that's fed by fossil fuels.
Right.
The machinery, but also the fertilizers and everything is made from using fossil fuels. So, you have the energy system going through a shock. Well, then it's going to create a downstream shock in the food system and in many other systems, right? So I think as people who think who plan into the future, who look at how the systems might kind of evolve and develop, key decision makers, I think it's important that we consider what these shocks might be and how we can prepare for them. And I think one way in terms of our food, and this is what's been driving my work in urban agriculture, part of it, right? It's also community and everything else. But we have a food system that's 80-90% reliant on global supply chains of food. So you get a wobble. We had that during the pandemic. But what if you get more than a wobble and things are actually shut down? We have maybe 7 days of supply of food in the city. But imagine if we had a much more resilient system and a rebalanced system where urban agriculture, rural agriculture, right around London, we have a connection to New Moon farm, right? So rebuilding those urban-rural connections in food, and then also bringing in urban agriculture to the places that are open to urban agriculture, right? Not everyone wants to grow their own food, which is understandable. But as a system, as an urban system, I think we need to grow more of our own food and to rebuild those connections to the farmers around London. We live in a food basket.
Absolutely.
So even if all the food stuff coming into Ontario shut down, we should be able to grow sustain ourselves, right?
Be prepared to not be shocked by the shock.
Yes.
Okay, we've talked about a lot of stuff today.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd like to talk about that I didn't cover?
Oh, that's always a question that I'm like, okay. Always comes up.
I mean, I'm okay to be told I did a great job.
Well, maybe I'll just mention kind of a new project.
Yes.
That I'm working on, and that the Patch and other community groups hopefully will become involved in, and is the edible neighborhood concept.
Yes.
So creating landscapes of abundance. So it kind of brings together all these various projects that I've helped initiate, and I had the pleasure working on with many others, collaborators, friends, neighbors. So these gardening places that we've helped establish are great, so that people have opportunities now to go out and learn about how to grow fruits and vegetables, right? But thinking about that abundance in a more broad, more holistic way. This project would create this edible neighborhood where we have a plan for all sectors of society,
right?
And how we can help them get access to the food that they need.
You're connecting again.
And connecting, like there could be, people who can't get out, right, for various reasons. They can't get out, maybe just a certain time of the year. So can we connect them with people who can help them going grocery shopping, creating opportunities for indoor growing, for balcony growing, right? Getting these resources available for the people who would like to do that, and then bringing in these rural growers and connecting them directly with the residents, whoever would like to be part of it, right? And it could be in the form of community-supported agriculture, and New Moon is already doing this.
There.
But there might be other opportunities like setting up a market. There's already a neighbor who's doing a community food pantry, and it would be great if we expanded the concept to not just non-perishable to perishable food, right? And that the food hub could contribute to.
That would be great.
And New Moon, right? So creating landscapes of abundance where people are well connected in order to sustain themselves the way they view that that's the most appropriate for them.
Okay. Last question.
Okay.
What keeps you growing?
Well, I love putting my hands into the dirt, into soil.
Yeah.
because it's not dirt. It's a living thing. It's a living ecosystem, the soil system. And I just love being out there, either putting seeds into the ground, weeding, just interacting with the garden. And when I do that with others, like that really, gives me a lot of energy, a lot of hope, and keeps me growing.
And where can people find out about all the great work that you're doing online?
That's a good question. And they can go to patchlondon.ca.
Yes.
That's one good way. They can connect through Facebook.
Yep.
Should be awesome. Kensington Village, so the neighborhood where I live, we have a really active Facebook.
The famous Kiva.
The famous Kiva group. We are working on a website, which would be great to have.
Very nice.
And if people Google my name, they might be able to find links to reports. And probably emailing me would be the quickest way to connect with me. And I love to then connect them. So I love connecting people.
Yes.
So if I find out that someone's interested in this and I know of another person or organization, like I could just be that connector.
You keep doing that. Gabor, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. This was great.
Thank you.
Growability is hosted by Joe Gansiflis and Holly Pugsley and produced by Joe Gansiflis and Adam Kaplan. Special thanks to this week's guest, Dr. Gabor Sass. Lighting and camera design by Kevin Labont, with production support from Oliver Gansiflis. Growability's production was made much easier with the help of Jesse Chen, Terry Fujioka, Zach Grossman, Zachary Meads, Leo Shin, and Deborah Camargo from Fanshawe College's Broadcasting, Television, and Film Production program. Thanks to Janice Robinson from Fanshawe for arranging for these students' invaluable participation. Holly Pugsley of Just Keep Growing provided the plants and made sure they looked great. Audience and Marketing Strategy by Japs Karmiglani, with support from Dorantina Uka and Tess Alcock. Our theme music is Wandering William by Adrian Walter and can be found on Soundstripe. Thanks as well to Hubert Orlowski for providing technical and audio engineering advice to help our podcast sound great. Adam Kaplan, that's me, is Webisode's executive producer, and Sammy Orlowski is our senior creator. Special thanks to Jennifer Routley from Siskins the Law Firm for arranging to host us at their beautiful head office in downtown London, Ontario. Growability is a Webisodes production and is produced with the support and participation of the team at The Patch and Hutton House.